أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه من والاه. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم اجعل خير أعمالنا خواتيمها خير أيامنا يوم أن نلقاك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Continuing inshallah about the seerah after the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, the Islamic history. And where did we stop? Is this not close enough? Can you turn it up a little bit? Who remembers? Where did we stop last time? Nobody remembers. What did we cover? What? Yes, Jazakumullah. We did not actually start the coverage of the Khilafah of Bakr AsSiddiq alayhi ridwanullah, but we stopped by the death of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And we said the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam died on Monday. That's what we said, alayhi salatu wasalam. Now what happened after the death of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam? Wallah, if we can just, Assalamu alaikum, Jazakumullah khair. Too much noise coming from outside. If you remember the last thing that we discussed about the death of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, as to how difficult it was for the Sahaba alayhim ridwanullah. And first how Umar ibn Khattab was in denial, objecting and shouting and screaming, until Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah came and put everything basically back where it was in perspective. And this really shows the strength of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah, that despite the strength of everybody else, the only one that maintained his control and his balance was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah. Despite the sadness, despite the difficulty, but he was able basically to put it as it was when he said to the Sahaba alayhi ridwanullah, whoever was worshipping Muhammad, Muhammad is dead. And whoever was worshipping Allah, then Allah is the living that never dies. And reciting the verse in Ali Imran, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ أَفَإِنْ مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ انقلبتم على أعقابكم وَمَنْ ينقلب على عقبيه فلن يضر الله شيئا وسيجزي الله الشاكرين. That Muhammad was only a prophet or a messenger before which there were other messengers. So if he dies or gets killed, will you turn away from the path of Allah? If anyone does that, he's only harming himself, and Allah would reward those that are thankful. So when the Prophet ﷺ, of course, died, now what was to happen afterward? And this was the big question. Who was to become the leader? That's when the Ansar ﷺ met or rushed to meet in a place called Saqifat Bani Sa'ida on the same day to decide as to who was the leader. And the reason for that is that the Ansar ﷺ, they were not looking basically to take the leadership away from the Muhajirin or from the other Muslims, but they had some major concern. Their concern, and this was expressed initially, if you remember, after this or during the second pledge of Al-Aqaba, when they told the Prophet ﷺ that, Ya Rasulullah, if you become Muslim, if you follow you, and we give you our loyalty and allegiance, basically we'll be cutting our ties with everybody else. So if your own people become Muslim, will you leave us and go back to your own people? And the Prophet ﷺ, of course, he fulfilled that promise, and he said, I will be with you, no matter what. And he did that ﷺ. And of course, they had that concern again after the Battle of Hunayn, when they saw the Prophet ﷺ giving the booties for the new Muslims from the Muhajirin and leaving them out. But the Prophet ﷺ also reminded them of that I'm with you, and whatever happens, I will never leave you. But now the Prophet ﷺ is dead. And they were concerned, first of all, that most of the Arabs became Muslims, most of the people of Arabia became Muslim, not just out of conviction, but more out of fear, because the Muslims were strong, and so those pledged their loyalty and allegiance. Now, of course, some of them believed in Islam, but it was mostly that element of strength and power that basically subdued them and enforced them to become Muslim. They were not forced to become Muslim, but because of the strength of the Muslim, that really motivated them to become a Muslim. And the Ansar, they were concerned that now with the death of the Prophet, some of them would be leaving Islam and will be stuck, basically. Not only that, but also the concern that the Muhajirin, the people that came from Arabia, which make the backbone of the da'wah basically, might leave us and go back to Mecca. Because the reason they came to Medina is that the Prophet ﷺ was there, right? That's why they migrated to Medina, to join the Prophet ﷺ and to be part of his team. But now that the Prophet is dead, so they were concerned that they might leave back. And as such, they will be stuck. That's why they started basically thinking about the leadership. And they met by themselves, without the Muhajirin, in a place called Saqifat Bani Sa'ida. And they started deciding, and after consulting, basically they agreed that saying that O Ansar, you supported the Prophet ﷺ. You gave him shelter when his own people kicked him out, and you gave him support and you believed in him, then you deserve the leadership. And they agreed on appointing Sa'd ibn Ubadah alayhi ridwanullah as their leader. And they pledged support to him. Sa'd ibn Ubadah was sick at that time. Basically, he agreed to that. Meanwhile, some of the Ansar themselves, they rushed back to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Umar alayhi ridwanullah to inform them of what was happening. Now the Muhajirin were really busy with the Prophet ﷺ preparing for the burial of the Prophet. That's why they did not basically bother with anything else. But some of the Ansar, they left and they brought Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Umar al-Khattab alayhi ridwanullah and asked them to come and join their brothers in Saqifat Bani Sa'ida before they decide on anything. So Abu Bakr as-Siddiq took Umar, and he also took with him Abu Ubaidah, Amir ibn al-Jarrah, the Amin, the trustworthy person of this ummah. As the Prophet called him, Aminu hadhihi al-ummah, Abu Ubaidah, Amir ibn al-Jarrah. And afterward, Banu Sa'ida. And on their way, some of the other Ansar also joined them to indicate that it is not divided basically among the Muhajirin and the Ansar. And they reached there. By the time they reached there, of course, the bay'ah or the pledge was already made to Sa'd ibn Ubadah alayhi ridwanullah. Then Umar ibn Khattab alayhi ridwanullah said, فَزَوَّرْتُ فِي نَفْسِي يعني حَسَّنْتُ فِي نَفْسِي. I prepared some beautiful words so I can say them before everybody, when addressing everybody. I prepared them in my mind. And he said, before I stepped up to say anything, then Abu Bakr as-Siddiq told me, عَلَى رَسْلِكَ يَا Umar. Sit down, O Umar. And of course, Umar al-Khattab had a lot of respect for Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, so he would not speak without the permission of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. SubhanAllah, look at the love and respect they had for one another. So Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah stood up and he says, "O people, we are the Muhajirin, we are the immigrants, and we are the first one to become Muslims. And we are the first ones to follow the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and we are the most noble among you, and the one that are connected the closest to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam." And he said, we became Muslim before you, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us in the Quran before He mentioned you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ وَالَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُم بِإِحْسَانٍ. And the early Muslims from the Muhajirin and the Ansar. So Allah put us before He put you in the Quran. So we are the Muhajirin and you are the supporters. You are our brothers in the religion, you are our partners, and you are supporters toward or against our enemy. You gave us shelter and you gave us support. May Allah reward you all the goodness from Him. We are the leaders, you are the deputies. And he mentioned something very important. He says that the Arabs will not give their loyalty except to somebody from Quraysh. Because many of them were still basically, still fresh into Islam. So they will not give loyalty. And this is an important factor in here. And that's what Abu Bakr actually was concerned with. Is that they will not give loyalty except to somebody who comes from the same place as the Prophet and who is connected to the Prophet ﷺ. And he said that do not take from your brothers, the Muhajirin, that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. And Umar alayhi ridwanullah, as he was listening, he said that everything good I had in mind of saying, Abu Bakr said it. And he even said it much better than I did. And then Abu Bakr said, then I have selected to the people, he said, I have selected these two, one of which to be your leader. And he held the hand of Umar and the hand of Ubaidah Amir ibn al-Jarrah. And Umar, he said, that's the one thing I did not like. He says, I would wish for anything except, he says, I would wish to die except to be a leader under which there will be Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So I could never be the leader of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. I would not accept that. So he said, this is the one thing that I hated from there. And people started basically coming up with suggestions. Al-Habab ibn al-Mundhir, he said, well, 1 year it will be, or one time it will be a leader from you. The second time we will be leader from us, from the Ansar. And an argument was about to be erupted. Then Umar alayhi ridwanullah, and of course Umar had a loud voice. He stood up and he says, "O people, this is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. This is the companion of the Prophet that Allah mentioned in the Quran. He was his companion in the migration and his companion in the cave, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, وَثَانِ اثْنَيْنِ إِذْ هُمَا فِي الْغَارِ." That he was the second in the Quran. And the Prophet ﷺ chose him to lead you in the prayer above everybody else. So who among you will choose to lead him in the prayer? Because the Amir will be leading the prayer. So he said that the Prophet ﷺ chose him to lead all of you in the prayer. Who among you will agree to lead him in the prayer? They said, none of us. Then Umar alayhi ridwanullah said, then ya Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, stretch your hand so I can give you the bay'ah, we can give you the pledge. And Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah said, no, you will be the leader because you are stronger than me. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq said to Umar ibn Khattab, you are stronger than me. Umar alayhi ridwanullah said, but you are much greater than I. And he says, you'll become a leader and my strength will be part of your greatness, will be with your greatness. And he said, stretch your hand so I can give you the bay'ah. And before Umar tried to give him the bay'ah, then one of the people from the Ansar, Bashir ibn Sa'd alayhi ridwanullah, jumped and he was the first to give Abu Bakr as-Siddiq the pledge to become the leader. And then everybody basically jumped into giving Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah the bay'ah, the pledge for being the leader, except one person who was Sa'd ibn Ubadah. I mean, it was an awkward situation, of course, and also because he was sick. But he gave the pledge the very next day, alayhi ridwanullah. So everybody basically gathered to give Abu Bakr as-Siddiq the pledge. And this was the same day that the Prophet ﷺ died. You know, because the Sahaba ﷺ were aware of that situation. Yes, the death of the Prophet, and the Prophet was to be buried, and somebody was taking care of that. But here there's something that's much more important now, that the Prophet is dead ﷺ, which is the affair of the Muslims. And of course the effort was basically to create or to make sure that no rift or no division actually would happen. And then the following day, on Tuesday, then after Salat al-Dhuhr, people gathered for Salat al-Dhuhr, and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq wanted to get on the minbar to address everybody. And before Abu Bakr as-Siddiq said anything, then Umar alayhi ridwanullah stood and took permission from him to address the crowd. And he said to them, whatever I said yesterday, it was a slip from the shaitan. What did he say yesterday, Umar alayhi ridwanullah, the day before on Monday? What was he referring to? When he said that the Prophet did not die. Remember, you know, we're talking about the day after the death of the Prophet. Umar alayhi ridwanullah was in denial and he was shouting and threatening everybody that the Prophet did not die, the Prophet just fainted. And he's coming back to kill anyone that claims that the Prophet is dead. So here Umar, referring to that instance, he said that this statement that I made was from the shaitan. I should not have said that. SubhanAllah, look how great he was. You know, as great as he was, he found it basically in his heart to apologize and to say basically that I did something wrong. And Umar was like that, alayhi ridwanullah. He would admit his wrongdoing whenever actually he would do that. And he said to them that your people of Shura, or the people of consultation, yesterday has chosen the companion of the Prophet ﷺ in the cave as your leader, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah. Then stand up and then give him the bay'ah and listen to him. Then Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah addressed the crowd, and he started by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and making salat on the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And he said, O people, I was chosen as your leader and I am not the best of you. And of course he was the best, but that's out of his humbleness. I mean, he was the best per the statements of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. When the Prophet said that there's nobody in this ummah who is better than Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, who was next to the Prophet ﷺ. So he said, O people, I was chosen as your leader and I was not the best among you. And he said, if I do something good, then help me out. And if I do something bad, then straighten me up. And he said, truthfulness is a trust, and then lying is a betrayal. And he says, the weak among you will be strength in my eyes until I get him his rights. And the strong among you, he will be weak in my eyes until I take the rights of others away from him. And he says, whenever people leave jihad, the fight for the sake of Allah, then they will become humiliated. And he says, whenever sin and fornication spread in any nation, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will spread sickness and hardship among them. Obey me so long as obey Allah. Obey me so long as obey Allah and His Messenger. If I disobey Allah and I disobey the Messenger, then you should not obey me in any way. Go ahead and then go to start. He says, "Qumu ila salatikum yarhamukum Allah." Stand up to pray. May Allah have mercy on you. And this was Tuesday, the 13th of Rabi' al-Awwal. Meanwhile, what was happening in the house of the Prophet ﷺ? The Prophet, of course, died in the house of Aisha, which is the room of Aisha alayhi ridwanullah. And then the Sahaba or the family of the Prophet ﷺ tried to prepare him for the washing. And the ones that washed him were Ali radiallahu anh, his cousin, Al-Abbas, his uncle Al-Fadl radiallahu anh, and Usama ibn Zayd, and Shakran, his servant alayhi ridwanullah. But then, so these are the ones that were basically set to prepare the Prophet ﷺ for the burial. Then one of the Ansari, his name is Aus ibn Khawli, he insisted on Ali that I ask you by Allah let me be there with you when you wash the Prophet ﷺ. Let me be with you. So under his insistence, and his begging, then they give in and they allow him to be with him. Now, of course, they wanted to wash the Prophet ﷺ. So several questions basically were raised. How should we wash him? Should we take his clothes off? And they felt really awkward that, we could never do that to the Prophet ﷺ. How should we bury him? Where should we bury him? They said that something happened, basically, it's a karama, or something happened, everybody fell asleep or half asleep, and they heard a voice coming from the side of the house saying that wash the Prophet ﷺ with his clothes on. So do not take his clothes off, and that's exactly what they did. So they kept his clothes on, and then Ali radiallahu anhu basically leaned him against his own chest, and Al-Fadl and the others basically were washing him alayhi salatu wassalam. And Usama and Shakran were basically pouring the water, and Al-Abbas was washing him himself. So where should they bury him afterward? They went and they consulted, of course, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah, the leader of the Muslims by now, and of course the closest companion to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. And Abu Bakr as-Siddiq said, I heard the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam saying, إِنَّ مَعْشَرَ الْأَنْبِيَاء نُدْفَنُ حَيْثُ نُقْبَدْ, that we prophets, we are buried wherever we die. That's why the decision was to bury him in the house of Aisha alayha ridwanullah. That's where he was buried. Now one note in here is that the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam basically prohibited us from having graves in the masajid. That we should not have graves inside the masajid. But the question is, when you go to the Masjid al-Nabawi, isn't the Prophet buried in the masjid? He is buried in the masjid, right? Yes? No, he's not buried in the masjid. The Prophet ﷺ was buried in the house of Aisha alayha ridwanullah. But of course, with the expansion of the masjid, it was engulfed, in the masjid. But the Prophet was buried outside the masjid. At that time, the Prophet was buried in the house of Aisha radiallahu anha. That's an important thing to keep in mind. So Abu Bakr as-Siddiq told them that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, or the Prophet ﷺ, is to be buried in the place that he died in, which is the house of Aisha radiallahu anha. And how should they bury him? Now the Muslims had two ways of burying. There is something, the Muhajirin, they would do something called the darh, which is, or shiq, that they will go like straight, and the body is put like that, and the dirt is put on the top. The Ansar used to bury in a way called the lahd, where they will go down in an L shape. So they will go down and to the side, and the body is put to the side. This is called the lahd, and both are halal ways of burial. So which way should they bury the Prophet ﷺ? Here they called Abu Ubaidah from the Muhajirin to bury the Prophet, and they called Abu Talha from the Ansar to bury the Prophet, and they said, whoever comes first, then that's how we would bury the Prophet ﷺ. And Abu Talha is the one that came first. So they buried the Prophet ﷺ according to the lahd way, which is going down and to the side, but both ways are correct. And then people started praying on the Prophet ﷺ, and everybody prayed on the Prophet ﷺ, the men, the women, and the children. And the digging started basically Tuesday night, and the Prophet ﷺ was buried right after that. But as they were burying, then Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, they were there. He was standing in there, and as they put the Prophet ﷺ in the grave, then he had a ring. So he threw his ring in the grave. And he told the others that, I'm sorry, my ring just fell off. Let me go and then fetch it. And he goes down, of course, and he hugs the Prophet ﷺ. And he said, I want to be the last person to hug the Prophet ﷺ. And he goes out, and he was buried there. SubhanAllah, you can imagine the big loss and the situation. Fatima alayhi ridwanullah, when she saw Ali, and she told him that, Ya Ali, أطابت أنفسكم أن تحث التراب على وجه رسول الله. She said, how could you feel comfortable? How could you do it? How could you feel comfortable throwing the dirt on the face of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam? But Ali radiallahu anha told her that this is what the Prophet commanded us to do. That's the way it is. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, was buried. And it's something to remember. SubhanAllah, they said that Bilal ibn Rabah alayhi ridwanullah never made adhan after the death of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. He used to be the mu'adhin of the Prophet ﷺ, that never once he made adhan after the death of the Prophet. But then there was one situation when the Muslims won in a place called Al-Ju'rana in the Golan Heights. they said to Umar ibn Khattab, Ya Umar ibn Khattab, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, that it is the day of victory and day of greatness and glory. Why don't you insist on Bilal to make adhan for us? Yeah, and subhanAllah, it's a day like when the Prophet was alive. Ask him and insist that he will make dua, he will make adhan, for us. And of course, Umar insisted. Bilal, of course, first he did not want to do it. But under the insistence of Umar ibn Khattab alayhi ridwanillah, then he stood and he started making dua. And subhanAllah, everybody, of course, remembered the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And he says he went on until he reached wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, that he stopped. He could not say anything. He said he tried, but he could not say anything. He could not remembering the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Subhanallah, the Sahaba alayhi ridwanillah felt the loss of the Prophet, that it is not just the loss of a person, but somebody that they loved more than they loved their own selves. But also with the death of the Prophet ﷺ, the revelation ended. So this connection is no more. There's no more connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send the guidance. But as the Prophet ﷺ himself told us, عِشْ مَا شِئْتَ عِشْ مَا شِئْتَ فَإِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ وَأَحْبِبْ مَنْ شِئْتَ فَإِنَّكَ مُفَارِقُهُ. It's a sad statement, but that's the reality. He said, live for as long as you want, eventually you will die. That's the reality of things. And he said, love whomever you want, eventually you would leave them. You will part with them, or they would leave you. That's the reality of things, and that's what happened to the Prophet ﷺ. Now with the death of the Prophet ﷺ, then another great era actually started, which is the era of Al-Khilafah Al-Rashida, the guided Khilafah. And a few things to remember, wallahi, whenever we're talking about the Sahaba alayhim ridwanillah, we're going to cover eventually a very troubled period, where even some big major fighting happened, even among the Sahaba. It is really important when talking about the Sahaba to explain their actions in the best way, and not to get into their intention. You're not supposed to get into the intention of anybody that you're dealing with directly. So even if you're dealing with a sister directly, or a brother, you cannot say her intention is this and her intention is that. Let alone get into the intention of somebody who lived 1400 years ago, and saying that that's really why they do it, or that was their intention. But the action of the Sahaba alayhi ridwanillah should be explained in the best way. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, إِذَا ذُكِرَ أَصْحَابِ فَأَمْسِكُوا, that when my Sahaba, my companions are mentioned, hold your tongue back, do not say anything bad about them. Because there's nobody in this ummah that will even come close to the Sahaba alayhi ridwanillah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised them in the Quran like He praised nobody else. Allah says, لَقَدْ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ يُبَيِّعُونَكَ تَحْتَ الشَّجَرَةِ. Allah was pleased with the believers as they gave the pledge under the tree. This is the Hudaybiyah treaty. How many were with the Prophet ﷺ in that instance? 1400. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is praising all 1400. This is khabar. In the Sharia and the Quran, there's something called hukum, ahkam, and there are certain things called akhbar. Ahkam meaning legislation. This is halal, this is haram, this is required, this is recommended. The ahkam might change, might become abrogated, might become nasakh, mansukha. Might change because the revelation was in process, was still in progress. But the akhbar will never be abrogated. What's the akhbar? Meaning the piece of information that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us, that will never change. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not tell us, for example, this person will go to Al-Jannah, and later on, He will tell us, no, he's going to go to hellfire. This will never happen. Because if it happens, it means that Allah did not know accurately in the beginning. And of course, the knowledge of Allah is accurate, perfect, absolute. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Abu Lahab will go to hellfire when Abu Lahab was still alive. Allah says, تَبَّتْ يَدَا أَبِي لَهَبٍ وَتَبَّ مَا أَغْنَى عَنْهُ مَالُهُ وَمَا كَسَبَ سَيَصْلَى نَارًا ذَاتَ لَهَبٍ وَامْرَأَتُهُ حَمَّالَةَ الْحَطَبِ. He will go to hellfire when Abu Lahab was still alive. Abu Lahab could have, just for the sake of argument, Abu Lahab could have said, hey, listen everybody. He could make the claim of being a Muslim, even wrongly so. He could say, listen everybody, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله, the Quran is a lie. He could have said that, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that he will not even make that claim. That's why Surah Al-Lahab is one of the miracles of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sealed the fate of somebody when he's still alive. So that's why the akhbar will never be abrogated. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the Sahaba that Allah says, وَكُلًّا وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الْحُسْنَى, Allah promised goodness and reward for each one of them, it means this will never change. Allah will never change His promise. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ, You know, Allah was pleased with them, meaning this will never change. This is khabar, and a khabar will never be abrogated. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ وَالَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُم بِإِحْسَانٍ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. That the early Muslims from the Muhajirin and the Ansar and those that follow them, they were pleased with Allah and Allah was pleased with them. This will never change. This can never change. Because if it changes, it means Allah did not know enough. Hasha subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, ta'ala subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is above all of that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised the Muhajirin and the Ansar and the companions of the Prophet. That's why whenever we talk about anything regarding the companions of the Prophet, then we explain it in the best way. We explain it in the best way, and we do not get into the intention and trying to guess. Now, one thing that is certain is that the first 50 years after the migration were the most glorious years in the life of this ummah. In this short period of time, Islam spread through much of the world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not give them success unless they deserve it. That's why this is an indication of how great the Sahaba alayhi were. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like I said, promised them reward over and over in the Quran and in many other places. And the Prophet ﷺ said, حديث أبي سعيد الخدري لا تسبوا أصحابي فوالذي نفسي بيده لو أنفق أحدكم مثل أحد ذهبا ما أدرك مد أحدهم ولا نصيفه. That he says, do not insult my companions. He says, if one of you spend like the mountains of Uhud in gold. Have you seen the mountain of Uhud? Anybody's been there? It's a huge mountain. The Prophet says, if all of that is gold and you own it, and you spend all of that for the sake of Allah, it will not be equivalent to what one of my own companion will spend in his handful, just a handful, or even half of it. That's why we could never match what the Sahaba alayhi did. The suhbah is a status. It is not just a caliber. It's just a status. That's why when Ibn Taymiyyah was asked, who is greater, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz? Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, by the way, he's considered by many to be the fifth Ghalid Khalifa, of the same caliber as the first four. So as far as caliber is concerned, he's somewhere up there. So they asked Ibn Taymiyyah, who is greater, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz or Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan? And he said, how can you compare somebody, meaning Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, to somebody whose eyes saw the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam? Of course, Muawiyah is greater because he's a Sahabi, the other one is not. So that is a status. The suhbah, the companionship is a status. And when we're dealing with the Sahaba, we should keep that in mind. And also, whenever we're talking about any person, we should keep in mind that there's no one infallible except the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. There's no ma'soom except the Prophet. There's no one who's perfect except the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So everyone short of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam will have something good and something bad about them. That's everybody. Everybody short of the Prophet will have something good and something bad. The fact that something or someone is mostly good and he does something wrong, it does not make him all wrong. And the other way is true. If somebody is normally bad and has done something good at some moment, it doesn't suddenly make him a good person. So that's why we don't forget the greatness of the Sahaba alayhi ridwanullah. And whenever we're looking at people, we want to look at their overall contribution. Subhanallah, there's something that came to mind about Ibn Taymiyyah. We're talking about him, Al-Dhahabi, Imam Al-Dhahabi, who wrote Siyar A'lam Al-Nubala. And he said that about Ibn Taymiyyah, he says, وَلَكَنْ انْفَرَدَ بِفَتَاوٍ نِيلَ مِنْ عِرْضِهِ لِأَجْلِهَا وَهِيَ مَغْمُورَةٌ فِي بَحْرِ حَسَنَاتِهِ. That he said certain things that people insulted him in his honor because of them. Even Ibn Taymiyyah has done something that maybe others will disagree with. And he says, but those are so insignificant compared to the oceans of goodness that he has done. So when we're talking about the Sahaba, of course, min bab awla, more so the Sahaba alayhi ridwanullah, that even if they did something wrong or something mistake or as a result of a bad ijtihad, it does not suddenly make them bad people. It does not cancel their fadl, their greatness and their favor in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we keep these things in mind whenever we're talking about the Sahaba, that these are the ones that protected the religion for us. These are the ones that preserved the religion for us. If it wasn't for these Sahaba, the religion would not have reached us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the Prophet and He chose His companions. And these are the ones that carried the message after the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. If there are Muslims in Egypt today, anyone from Egypt? There should be a good number normally. If there's any Muslim in Egypt today, and of course Egypt has many great scholars that came out of Egypt, it's because of Amr ibn al-As alayhi ridwanullah. Despite the criticism of Amr ibn al-As, he's the one that introduced Islam to Egypt. You can imagine that. How many scholars came out of Egypt? That's what the Sahaba did, alayhim ridwanillah. Umar ibn Khattab, of course, he's the one that supported him in that regard. That's why the Sahaba had the fadl that should never be forgotten, no matter what. Even if they did something wrong, it does not cancel their favor. So now we get into, of course, the first and the greatest of all the Khalifa, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanillah. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, of course, used to be nicknamed Khalifata Rasulillah. The word Amir al-Mu'mineen was first used with Umar ibn Khattab alayhi ridwanillah. Because after Umar became Amir al-Mu'mineen, became the Khalifa, then people started thinking, what should we call him? Khalifata Rasulillah or Khalifata Khalifati Rasulillah? The Khalifa of the Messenger alayhi salatu wassalam. Until one of the Bedouins came and asked, where is Amir al-Mu'mineen? Where is the Amir of the believers? And they said to Umar, he's right. We are the Mu'mineen, and you are the Amir. So you are Amir al-Mu'mineen, and that's when the name Amir al-Mu'mineen started basically spreading. So Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanillah was the first Khalifa, and he was known as Khalifat Rasulullah alayhi ridwanillah. What was his real name, by the way? We know the whole deal. That's his name, actually, Abdullah ibn Uthman. Actually, his father was Uthman, and his father was nicknamed Abu Quhafa. So Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanillah, his name is Abdullah. That was his name. His name is Abdullah, the son of Abu Quhafa or Uthman. His father is Uthman, and he's nicknamed Abu Quhafa, the son of Amir from Quraysh. He connects with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam for Murrah ibn Ka'b. So he has a common, ancestry with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. He was born 2 years after the year of the elephant, which makes him, of course, 2 years younger than the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So he was his close companion, and he was, 2 years younger than the Prophet. He was rich, and he was known to have the greatest of manners, alayhi ridwanillah, even before Islam. Subhanallah, that's why when Hadith al-Ifk happened, the false accusation of Aisha radiallahu anha, that Aisha, his daughter, committed adultery, and he said, Subhanallah, we would never do these things even in Jahiliyyah. How can we do it after Islam? So he was known for his great character even before Islam alayhi ridwanillah. He was the first of the men to become Muslim. Of course, the first to become Muslim was Khadija radiallahu anha, and then Ali, because he was living in the house of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and then Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and then Zayn ibn Haritha radiallahu anhu. And then the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, ما دعوت أحدا إلى الإسلام إلا وكانت له كبوة إلا أبي بكر. He says, whenever I invite anybody to Islam, he had a little bit of hesitation. A little bit of hesitation, a little bit of questioning. Everybody, he says, except Abu Bakr. He was the only one that immediately gave in, because he knew the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and he knew what the Prophet actually was preaching. He was known, of course, as, his nickname was Abu Bakr, and his title was as-Siddiq, which is the title that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam gave him when he returned from Al-Isra and Al-Mi'raj. When the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam basically was talking before everybody, after the kuffar of Quraysh were basically dispersing and kicking people away from the Prophet. Now the Prophet came and he told everybody that last night I went to Jerusalem and I came back. So now the kuffar of Quraysh started gathering the people to listen to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And in the crowd, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq told him, Ya Rasulullah, we know you've never been to Jerusalem before. Why don't you describe it to us? As a proof to the others that you did go to Jerusalem. And he says then, Jerusalem was brought in front of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. He was looking at it. And people started asking him questions. Ya Muhammad, what is there behind these stairs? And the Prophet would say, there's this and there's that. And Abu Bakr would say, Sadaqt. And he would be happily saying that, Sadaqta ya Rasulullah. Every time the Prophet would say something, Abu Bakr would tell him, Sadaqta ya Rasulullah. And the Prophet told him, and you are as-Siddiq. That's what he was known as Siddiq from then on. And as-Siddiq, by the way, is not just a common title, but it's also a status that is next to the prophets. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. The prophets, he says, was-Siddiq, it says, was-Siddiqeen was-Shuhada. That after the prophets come the Siddiqeen and the Shaheeds. So the Siddiq is even higher than the Shaheed. And Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanillah was one such people. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said that nobody walked on this earth after the Prophet who was better than Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanillah. Among the people that became Muslim on the hands of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu. Some of them, العشر المبشرين بالجنة, Talha ibn Ubaidillah, Zubair ibn al-Awwam, al-Arqam, some of the greatest Sahaba became Muslim on the hands of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. And of course, he's one of the 10 Mubashirin bil Jannah. He freed many of the slaves that were tortured for being a Muslim. Among them, of course, was Bilal ibn Rabah, alayhi ridwanillah. Among them was Amr ibn Fuhayra, and then others. He was described by the people of the Siyar and the Tarikh as someone who was not very tall, not very short. So he's middle in his height, and he says he was light skinned, and he was thin, very thin, and without much meat, so to speak, in his face. So his face was a thin face, and his eyes were like deeply socketed eyes, alayhi ridwanillah. And he has a crooked nose, as he was described, and he used to dye his beard with al-hinna, with hinna. He used to do that, alayhi ridwanillah. Now, he got married before Islam, twice. One of the women, her name is Qutayla bint Abd al-Uzza, and she gave him 2 children, Abdullah and Asma bint Abi Bakr. And he also married Riman bint Amir, the famous Riman radiallahu anha, and she gave him 2 children, a boy and a girl, and those were Aisha, of course, and Abdul Rahman, alayhim ridwanillah. And he married in Islam afterward Asma bint Umays, who was married to Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. Ja'far, of course, was killed in the Battle of Mu'tah, and he left a family. And that's how they were married, their marriages. So he married, he married his wife, alayhi ridwanillah. And after that, Habiba, and she gave him a son called Muhammad. And then Habiba bint Kharija, and she gave him Kulthum shortly after his death. So he had 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. The 3 boys, Abdullah, Abdul Rahman, and Muhammad. And then 3 girls, Asma, Aisha, and Kulthum. He was, of course, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ in the cave, and Allah mentioned him in the cave as the companion of the Prophet. وَثَانِ اثْنَيْنِ إِذْ هُمَا فِي الْغَارِ إِذْ يَقُولُ لِصَاحِبِهِ لَا تَحْزَنْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَنَا. That as he's saying to his companion, so Allah called him his companion. So if there was one companion, it would be Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, alayhi ridwanillah. And of course, he was the companion of the Prophet in the journey, in his great migration journey. I'm sorry, just trying to catch up with my notes. Of course, he gave birth. He gave his own daughter Aisha alayhi ridwanillah as a wife to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. And after the conquest of Mecca, when Mecca became Muslim, during the 9th year, when the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam wanted to send for Hajj, then he chose him as the Amir, actually on Hajj, as the one in charge of the Hajj, which is an indication of his favor. That's why here, by the way, the majority of the scholars is that the Prophet did not appoint a successor, despite everything else, but just to indicate his status. But some, they say that, of course, the Prophet hinted that that's really what he would prefer. By that, as the Prophet ﷺ chose him as the Amir of the Hajj, and also as choosing him to lead the Salat when the Prophet ﷺ was sick. And also in an authentic hadith, when a woman came to the Prophet ﷺ the year before his death, and the Prophet told her that you come back and check with me the next year. And she told him that, what if I don't find you? And the Prophet ﷺ told her that then you will check with Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So again, indicating the favor of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Now, one thing here about the bay'ah of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanillah, of course, the way it happened, Umar alayhi ridwanillah told him that, stretch your hand and I will give you bay'ah. And everybody after that came in. So during the Khilafah of Umar alayhi ridwanillah, one of the people, well, I forgot his name, maybe it'll come to me. He said that the bay'ah of Abu Bakr was a falta, was an exception. Umar said basically, stretch your hand and I will give it to you. So we have to do the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing. Now when we go to the masjid, then one of you guys will tell me, stretch your hand and I will give you the bay'ah. And Umar heard of that, alayhi ridwanillah, and he gathered all the people and he said to them, I heard some people among you saying that the bay'ah or the pledge of Abu Bakr was a falta, was an exception. And Umar said, indeed it was a falta, it was an exception. And there's none among you like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So if anyone tried to duplicate that, he will be punished severely. So indicating the pledge. Now, of course, here one thing that was mentioned, which is the pledge of Ali radiallahu anhu. Did Ali radiallahu anhu give the pledge to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq or not? Now here there are different narrations. One of them, they said that basically after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, he left a land in a place called Fadak. It was under his, basically at his disposal. So Fatima alayhi thought that since she was the only child of the Prophet ﷺ, then she was to inherit whatever the Prophet ﷺ left, and she felt that she has the right to that land of Fadak. But Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi heard the Prophet saying something that Fatima did not hear. The Prophet ﷺ said, نحن معشر الأنبياء لا نورث ما تركناه هو صدقة. That we prophets, whenever we leave something, we cannot leave an inheritance. He said that we prophets do not leave any inheritance. Whatever we leave is considered to be a sadaqah for the Muslims. That's why Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi took that land and he put it back, to the treasury of the Muslims. So it was not to be given to Fatima. And some narrations said that basically Fatima felt a little upset about that. And Ali radiallahu anhu did not give a bay'ah until after the death of Fatima alayhi in a way, in support, of the feeling of Fatima radiallahu anha. But here some of the scholars, by the way, one of them is the famous historian Mahmoud Shakir. He said that the part about the land of Fadak is correct. But he said the story about Ali delaying his bay'ah until after the death of Fatima is not correct. He said, first of all, Fatima alayhi because they said that Fatima, was upset with Abu Bakr and she would not talk to him. And he said, Mahmoud Shakir, by the way, is one of the greatest historians that took the Islamic history and purified it based on the authentic narrations. And he has a great series called the Tarikh al-Islami. But what he said, actually, Mahmoud Shakir, he said that Fatima is not expected actually to talk to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. I mean, it was not basically the norm of basically the woman and the man to go visit one another. And he says, especially knowing that she got very sick after the death of the Prophet. So she got very sick after the death of the Prophet. And of course, she died 6 months later. He said, that's why she did not go and visit Abu Bakr. And also, it was not the norm. So these things that were said about her holding a grudge against Abu Bakr is not correct. And he says what seems to be more correct based on the different narrations put together is that Ali radiallahu anh gave the pledge to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq on the same day that everybody did, which is the Tuesday of the 13th of Rabi' al-Awwal, before the burial of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. So that's really what happened with Ali radiallahu anh. So when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanillah, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, before his death, of course, he had prepared a huge army, basically to go attack Quda'a in Bilad al-Sham, and also for the Romans, to threaten the Romans. And the Prophet ﷺ, of course, had appointed somebody in charge of that army. Who was that person? Usama ibn Zayd, who was a young companion. And they said that one of the reasons, because actually this is like in revenge for the killing of his father that happened in Mu'tah, that those are the same people that the Prophet ﷺ was sending the army for. And of course, before the death of the Prophet ﷺ, Usama ibn Zayd did not want to leave. He was waiting to see what happens to the Prophet ﷺ, but he was able to gather basically a huge army on the outskirts of Medina. Now the question is, what should happen to this army? Should it be sent or should it not be actually sent? Something happened right after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. Most of Arabia became murtad. Most of Arabia became murtad, apostatized. They denounced Islam one way or another, except 3 cities: Mecca, Medina, and the Ta'if. Even though, subhanAllah, Ta'if became Muslim, of course, way later. No, as they said that even Mecca was about to apostatize, except that a poet, actually, his name is Lubayd al-Sha'ir, Lubayd the poet, played an important role. Lubayd the poet, of course, he was one of the captives in Battle of Badr. And he was saying bad things about the Prophet ﷺ. And now he is a captive in the hands of the Muslim. So Umar ibn Khattab alayhi ridwanillah, he says, Ya Rasulullah, he said bad things about you. Let me cut his head. And the Prophet ﷺ said no. Umar said, well, at least let me cut his tongue. And the Prophet said no. He said, well, Ya Rasulullah, at least let me break his teeth. So he will not say anything. And the Prophet ﷺ told him, leave him, Ya Umar. He may take a stand that will dignify the Muslims. And that's exactly what happened. After the death of, he became Muslim later on. And after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, you know, and people, by the way, they hold the words said by poets in high regard, high esteem. So the words of poets have a strong impact. That's why when Mecca started basically thinking or considering, you know, apostatizing, having a ridda, leaving, then Lubayd stood before everybody and he says, Wallahi, when I hear anybody talking about a ridda, saying it in nice, eloquent words, I'm going to cut his head off. Now people thought that, well, he's talking so strongly, he must have a lot of men backing him up. So they stopped. And because of his words, subhanAllah, as the Prophet prophesied, alayhi salatu wasalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected Mecca from apostasy. And this apostasy, by the way, took on different shapes. Some of the people basically denounced zakat, that they will stop paying the zakat. And of course, zakat is one of the pillars of Islam, and anyone that rejects the zakat, I'm not talking just not paying it, but anyone that denounces or rejects it is considered to be a kufr. So some of the people basically denounced or rejected the zakat altogether, and some of them even rejected the salat. And even some people basically claim to be prophets. You know, some people claim to be prophets. You know, of course, one person or two people claim to be prophet during the life of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, and those were Al-Aswad Al-Unasi and Musaylima the liar. And of course, after the death of the Prophet, even a woman named Sujaha bint al-Harith claimed to be a prophetess. You know, everybody basically claimed to be a prophet. And of course, they started, you know, of course, Musaylima had the famous, ayat. His famous, you know, of course, you know, he hears the Prophet talking about al-fil, you know, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ. So the fil is something that is common in the Quran. And the word مَا أَدْرَاكَ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ. You know, so he came up with something, الفيل وما أدراك ما الفيل له زلوم طويل وذيل قصير, you know, وجسم كبير. يعني some nonsense, the elephant, وما أدراك what the elephant is, a big body, long trunk, you know, thin tail, and some nonsense. And another one of his is يا ضفدع يا بنت ضفدعين نقي ما تنقين أعلاك في الماء وأسفلك في الطين لا الشاربة تمنعين ولا الماء تكدرين. That frog, you know, the daughter of the two mama and papa frogs, you know, croak for as loud as you want. You will not disturb anybody. You will not, you know, turbulate. Yeah, some nonsense. They said that Sujaha bint al-Harith came and visited him. And she told him, so you are a prophet? And he said, yes. And he asked her, so you are a prophet? She said, yes. What are some of the verses that you have? So she recited some of her verses, and he recited some of his verse. And they said, فَآمَنَتْ بِهِ وَآمَنَ بِهَا. So she believed in him, and he believed in her. You know, and they decided to get married. They said, and her mahr, he gave her a mahr. He said to her that your mahr is that you will not have to pray Salat al-Fajr or Salat al-Isha anymore. They said this was the worst mahr in history. Subhanallah. So he told her, this is the mahr of to your own people. Now your people don't have to pray Fajr or Isha anymore. Yeah, subhanallah, nothing but the deepest deviation. So anyway, and it started happening. There are a few people basically that claim to be prophets. You know, one of them is Sulayh ibn Khuwaylid al-Uzdi. And their own followers, their own people started following them. So it became, in a way, a big chaos in Arabia. That's when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah decided that he had to bring them back. He had to subdue them. That's why here, by the way, the scholars, they said that two people protected Islam after the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Not just protected the Muslims, but protected Islam itself. One of them was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq when he waged the wars of Ar-Ridda. Otherwise, Islam would have reached us without Fajr, without Isha probably, or without this or without that. Yeah, also by compiling the Quran, as we will discuss later on. And the other person was Ahmad ibn Hanbal, radiallahu anh, when it came to the stand that he took from the creation of the Quran. When the Mu'tazila were preaching that the Quran was created, and he was insisting that, and he was tortured for 15 years, that it was not created, but the Quran is the words of Allah. What is the difference? When you say created, that means it has shortcomings. We are created, we have shortcomings. But when you say the words of Allah, it means it is absolute, and it does not have any flaw. So Abu Bakr as-Siddiq decided to do that. So now, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah was deciding. We have the army of Usama ibn Zayd. What should we do with it? Should we send it to the goal that the Prophet ﷺ intended to, or should we use it for the ridda? Now here the companions, by the way, started giving their opinions. Umar alayhi ridwanullah said that no, we will deal with the ridda for now until the situation stabilizes, and then after that, we will send them later on. After that we will send it to whatever the Prophet intended to. And Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah insisted that I will never hold an army for any reason other than what the Prophet intended for. So we will send it exactly for what the Prophet intended. Then Umar alayhi ridwanullah, what about us in Medina? Then Abu Bakr as-Siddiq pulled him and he says, أخوار في الإسلام. He says, أشجاع في الجاهلية خوار في الإسلام. Then how can you courageous in Jahiliyyah and a coward in Islam? Subhanallah, look who is he saying that to, Umar ibn Khattab. That's why here it shows the strength of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, that he's even much stronger than Umar alayhi ridwanullah. And he says, I will fight them alone. He says, وَلَوْ انْفَرَدَتْ سَالِفَتِي. He says, even if my neck was cut until I only have one side left, if I die, I will fight them alone. And that's exactly what happened. So Abu Bakr as-Siddiq alayhi ridwanullah still sent out the army of Usama ibn Zayd. Meanwhile, he started preparing for the big battles of Ridda that brought back all of Arabia into Islam, which inshallah we'll be discussing next time. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Any question or comment? Why did he not appoint somebody? Jazakallah khair. Allah barik. That's a great question. Now, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam did not appoint somebody. Okay? But he hinted, or he indicated the status of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, as we will see later on, he did appoint somebody. Umar ibn Khattab specifically. Umar alayhi ridwanullah did not appoint somebody. He basically appointed a council, and those were the one to choose the leader. If you put all these three together, there's an important lesson here, is that how the leader is to be appointed is left to the people to decide. Because if the Prophet ﷺ appointed his successor, then that would have been the only way acceptable. That would have been the only way acceptable. But here, the Sharia actually is, how should I say, is more comprehensive than to be limited to one specific scenario. When you're talking about following the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ, it doesn't mean just duplicating one specific model. That only the only acceptable model is the model of Medina. No, it's not. Islam is much more flexible than that. So here Islam gave you some of the principles, and after that, you decide how to implement it. So by doing such, the Prophet ﷺ left it to the people to decide what is the best way. Do we go by voting of everybody? Do we go by appointing a shura council? Do we go by that? Whatever actually brings out the most benefit is the way to be done. Because the Prophet left it open. So the Prophet did not appoint, which means you decide how that to be done. And there are a lot of, by the way, tashri' that go under that category. Some of the aspects of the tashri' are detailed. They, especially regarding certain matters of the sharia that do not change through time. For example, matters of divorce, matters of inheritance, ibadat, But there are certain aspects of the tashri' that are what we call maqasidiyya, that are meant to achieve certain matters of benefit, masalih. And here, you do not stick to a specific model, but you look at the maslahah that is meant to be achieved by that, which is a big area, that Imam al-Shatibi, of course, has discussed in his al-Muwafaqat, maqasid al-Sharia. Coming once. خير إن شاء الله. طيب جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير.